April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet over occupied France. Sunlit sky, thin air, and Oberleutnant Joseph Pips Priller, lion among Jageschwader 26's finest, arched his brow. Through his canopy, he spied lanky, pot-bellied fighters rising into view, towering American jugs lumbering toward him like drunken freight cars. "At least they send us real targets today," he teased his wingman. These were Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, nicknamed the Jug by American pilots because of their milk jug silhouette, but to Priller and his comrades, the P-47s looked far more absurd than formidable. Barrel bodies, stubby wings, greenhouse canopies. Compared to their sleek, razor-thin Me-109s and nimble FW-190s, they seemed grotesquely overweight. Below, 16 P-47Cs of the 4th Fighter Group fought gravity, their hulking frames powered by throaty Pratt and Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines struggling skyward. Air-cool radials and turbo superchargers gave them endurance at altitude, but on first sight, pure comic fodder. The Thunderbolt story began in June 1940. Under pressure to build a high-altitude interceptor, Republic's designer Alexander Kartveli responded with something extraordinary. A dinosaur, monstrous, yes, but unmatched in raw power and durability. The XP-47B prototype, first flown May 6, 1941, tipped the scales at 65% heavier than its predecessors, with a turbo system that snaked through its fuselage, making every test pilot ask, "This thing actually flies?" The result wasn't nimble, it was robust, high-flying, and everything Luftwaffe fighters were not. But the Jug wasn't immediately loved. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, the 56th Fighter Group wrestled with the plane's quirks, ground loops, deadly torque rolls, and control freezes from compressibility at high speeds. Between September 1942 and January 1943, more pilots were lost in training mishaps than in German combat. The Jug was dangerous even when not under fire. When the P-47s finally entered combat over Europe in April 1943, their radio systems initially misconfigured tragically. Missions resumed on April 8, turn 0 search 0. 2 days later, Major Don Blakesley scored the Jug's first victory. Downing an FW-190 still, German propaganda had a field day. "These things climb like pregnant cows," Priller mocked home, to search for. The RAF chipped in with barbed humor. "The best evasive move in a Jug? Unstrap and run around the cockpit." But not everyone was laughing. Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, a fresh-faced Oklahoman-turned fighter pilot, called flight in the Thunderbolt like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The Jug didn't just fly, it roared, barreled forward, and delivered punishment, a modest compliment. Not exactly, but it captured his reaction perfectly. Yes, early Jug missions struggled in turning fights and climbing dogfights. Luftwaffe pilots exploited these, baiting Jugs into vertical traps or dive escapes. Still, something unexpected emerged. The Thunderbolt kept flying when it logically shouldn't. One returned from a mission looking like a Swiss cheese, riddled with cannon and bullet holes, proof of its astonishing durability. While German fighters collapsed at the first hit to their cooling systems, the Jug shrugged them off. Its air-cooled radial engine, self-sealing tanks, and armor made it remarkably tough. So here we stand on that dawn of April 8, 1943. Priller sneers. Young Johnson feels raw power. Engineers breathe relief. German pilots laugh and plan ambushes. But already, something fundamental is shifting. The Jug isn't a mistake, it's a statement. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns, 3,400 rounds, and turbocharged strength are sitting primed for a performance that would rewrite air combat. German laughter echoed that morning, but it wouldn't take long for it to die out. Over the coming months, the Thunderbolt would fly deeper, hit harder, and return from battles miraculously intact. That mountain of 50s would tear through enemy skies and ground, pulling German teeth in artillery and logistics alike. And for the Luftwaffe, the realization arrived. They had underestimated a mammoth, only to find themselves under its shadow. April 1943 had barely dawned, and the Thunderbolt's combat debut was barely weeks old. But before it could stun the Luftwaffe, It first had to survive American training fields and wow audiences with its engineering. From its birth in May 1941, the prototype XP-47B defied conventional fighter design. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine, a behemoth churning out 2,000 horsepower, was housed in a broad, horse-collar cowling essential for both cooling and the complex turbo-supercharger system that ran aft through the fuselage. At full duel, exhaust pipes glowed red and turbine blades spun at 21,300 RPM. Its climb from sea level to 15,000 feet in under 5 minutes astounded engineers. Here was a heavy dinosaur that flew fast and high anyway. Landing it, on the other hand, was a different beast. At Bridgeport, Connecticut, the 56th Fighter Group wrestled with the Thunderbolt's quirks. Its sheer mass, fresh handling characteristics, and unforgiving torque produced some tragic results between September 1942 and January 1943. 18 pilots and 41 aircraft lost in training accidents. More than the enemy would inflict in early combat. Pilots learned the hard way about ground loops, control freezes due to compressibility at high speed, and the consequences of misjudging such a heavy, high-performance plane. Despite its flaws, something in its bones told you a legend was hiding in there. As Robert S. Johnson later remarked, strapping yourself to a locomotive, the raw power was unforgettable. You didn't fly the Jug, you aimed it. By April 1943, 4th Fighter Group P-47s finally entered active service. April 10th missions were delayed by radio failures, but 2 days later, flight resumed. On April 15th, Major Don Blakesley scored the P-47's first air victory against an FW-190, proof it could fight back. Still, Luftwaffe aces only smirked. It climbs like a pregnant cow, Priller mocked in his report, and RAF pilots joked within earshot. If you're flying a Jug, scamper out and hide inside the fuselage. Between performance myths and training fiascos, the Jug reeked of menace or hilarity, depending on who was watching. Even amid initial losses, an odd pattern emerged. Thunderbolts returned, broken, rattled, but flying. On one mission, a P-47 limped home with more holes than intact skin, its radial engine ticking over like a heart that refused to stop. Aviation magazines noted, when Bf-109s or Spitfires caught a Ju-87 or Me-110 in a wing, boom, down it went. But the Jug? Its engine didn't shatter. Its structure didn't collapse. It defied expectations. Then came the firepower. The Thunderbolt's real punch wasn't its wingspan or engine. It was the 8 Browning and Slash M2. 50 caliber machine guns packed into those stubby wings. Up to 3,400 rounds of ammo packed a wall of lead the P-47 could unleash in sustained bursts. That's 13 pounds of fury per second raining down in a theater where many planes had only 4 lighter machine guns total. These guns weren't empty threats. They were devastating tools of air dominance. Mixed belts of ball, armor-piercing incendiary, and tracer rounds melted wing roots, shredded fuselages, and lit fuel tanks into fireballs. What made the P-47 stand apart, especially early on, was its turbo-normalizing supercharger, an innovation that maintained full engine power even at 27,000 feet. While Bf-109s and FW-190s gasped in thinning air, the Jug surged with strength. It wasn't built for tight dogfights, but at high altitudes it bullied the battlefield. Its dive speeds cracked speed records, not supersonic, but fast enough to run down any interceptor below. And when pilots learned to avoid turning battles and instead adopted boom and zoom tactics, dive, fire, climb, it turned into a lethal predator. German aces adapted. They baited P-47s into lower altitudes, where the Jug felt heavy and sluggish. They fought in turning circles, or used steep zoom climbs to escape its gun blasts. As recalled in late war recordings by JG-26 pilots, if attacked, we would dive to lower altitudes, then turn suddenly. The P-47s would overshoot and lose speed in the turn. It was only later with paddle blade props that they became equal in performance. Even then, they were trading blows with a beast that often refused to die. So by mid-1943, we stand at the turning point. training tragedies have given way to combat realities. The Jug is proving its mettle, not in formations or ballet, but in raw power, endurance, and lead-filled death zones. German laughter has cooled, but the real joke, as Luftwaffe planners began to see, was underestimating what the Jug could do. The Jug's secret was its guts. At its center roared an 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, 2,000 horsepower of raw, radial fury, renowned for both power and dependability. What set it apart wasn't size, it was what pushed it forward. Unlike most fighters that used mechanical superchargers, the Thunderbolt harnessed an exhaust-driven turbo supercharger mounted in the aft fuselage. Exhaust gases were fed rearward through complex ducting, powered a turbine stage, then channeled compressed air forward into the engine. That allowed the P-47 to maintain near sea level power at 27,000 feet, where the Luftwaffe's best fighters began to choke on thin air. This system gave the Thunderbolt unmatched stability at altitude and set the foundation for a transformational turnaround. Even with altitude power locked in, the Jug needed help on the climb. Acceleration and climb were slower than nimble German fighters. Then came the paddle blade propeller upgrade, a game changer. In mid-44, late P-47D and N models began rolling out with this broader, symmetrical prop. Pilots and engineers noted a tangible shift. Climb rate increased by about 500 feet per minute. Not a marginal gain, but enough to change chase dynamics above 20,000 feet. The paddle blades harnessed more of that R2800 horsepower, squeezing deeper performance from the already underutilized potential. It wasn't radical redesign, it was tweak, dominate. With turbo thrust and paddle efficiency combined, the P-47 turned into something Germans dreaded. It wasn't built for dogfighting, but at altitude, the Jug flew faster and dived harder than anyone thought possible. Osprey's expert breakdown notes. Early into level flight tests, the XP-47B hit over 412 miles per hour at 34,000 feet and maintained speed, faster than most Axis fighters could even follow at that height. Every dig, dive, or bounce and zoom hit became a lightning strike from above. The Thunderbolt could outdive any opponent and, even with its weight, slip back into the sky faster and better armored. That combo spelled trouble. Here's the dynamic. Luftwaffe planes like the Bf-109 or Fw-190 climbed faster on paper, but only at lower altitudes. Once above 25,000 feet, the Jug held its advantage. The turbo system maintained power, while others starved for oxygen. Dive bombing runs turned deadly too. German pilots soon learned that diving from a P-47 meant not just evading fire, but being overwhelmed by it on the way up. While its climb improved, the Thunderbolt still carried much more firepower. Its 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, fed with up to 3,400 rounds, meant it could stay in long bursts, far longer than German fighters, who flew lighter and faster. Soon, the P-47D adapted to the fighter-bomber role. From mid-1944 on, bubble-top models carried up to 1,000-pound bombs under each wing, transforming it into a ground attack rocket of American logic. It wasn't just a fighter, it was brute force delivered from the sky. Behind the scenes, American mass production kept the Jug fed with better parts, more upgrades, and fresh frames rolling off assembly lines in Evansville and Farmingdale. Over 2,500 P-47D Block 30s launched in late '44 alone. Germany, quietly running out of aircraft, could only adapt tactics, not scale. The Thunderbolt's upgrades didn't come from single engineers, they came from industrial power turned into performance. Picture a German squad up there, circling as they once did, waiting for the lightweight and slow fighter to fold. Suddenly, thunderous dive roars fill the sky. Jug after Jug screaming in, spitting lead, then roaring back into the sky. The pilot up top, flash of bullets, torn wing, smoke, but dead silent when the Jug stays airborne. That was becoming the new normal. We've gone from skeptic mockery to the Thunderbolt evolving, turbocharged engine, paddle blade prop, high-altitude speed envelope, bomb payloads, industrial mass production. The P-47 was no longer a joke, it was the unchained fist of American air dominance. The German pilots had mocked the P-47 as milk bottles on April 8, 1943, but by mid-1944, that sneer turned into terror. The same stout silhouette that seemed clumsy harnessed massive firepower and unshakable resilience. P-47s began to punch through the air with 8.50 caliber guns, each producing a storm of 12.72 pounds of lead per second, far larger than the weightier bursts of other Allied fighters. German pilots nicknamed these fighter bombers Jabos from the German Jagdbomber, and the name sank deep. Anywhere a Jabo roared by, soldiers ducked into trenches, armored columns scattered, communications shuttered in chaos. It was December 17, 1944, amid the Battle of the Bulge, the largest German counteroffensive. In a desperate bid, German motorized units clashed with Allied forces. P-47s ripped across the sky, delivering strafing barrages that turned armored convoys into smoldering wreckage. In one morning's sweep near Monschau, Germany, American Hellhawks pounded a German column. With more than 128 combined, 50s blazing, they destroyed over 115 vehicles, plus artillery pieces and infantry. German columns tried to escape into woods, but P-47s followed down narrow paths, strafing relentlessly. Tanks flipped, trucks exploded into fireballs, and retreating troops scrambled. The taste of Jabo terror spread fast. Every rumble in the distance became a heartbeat of dread. Anti-aircraft crews quivered. Commanders surrendered without a shot. German soldiers across the front whispered, "Acting Jabos, watch out for the fighter bombers." Between August 8 and 12, 1944, Thunderbolt pilots claimed destruction of 47 tanks, 122 motor vehicles, and heavy damage to German armored columns. On August 12 alone, they destroyed or damaged 350 locomotives, 3,000 plus rail cars, 800 other vehicles, and 2 barges. Particularly brutal was Operation Cobra, where P-47s attacked a trapped German convoy between Rancy and St. Denis-le-Vecchio. In one afternoon, they leveled 66 tanks, 204 vehicles, and 11 guns. Combat was not just numbers, it was human lives. First Lieutenant Leslie Bowes of the 365th Fighter Squadron lived the chaos firsthand. Bowes, in one December 1944 mission, witnessed bombs tearing through German road convoys. When Wingman Easterling was hit, Bowes screamed radio warnings before diving into combat with a wave of approaching Mi-109s. In a hair-raising split second, he tangled with the enemy, firing the Thunderbolts. 50s until he had just 66 rounds left across 8 guns. He racked up at least one confirmed kill amid the carnage. And there was 1st LT Robert V. Brule in January 1945, flying low over the Bulge. In textbook Close Air Support, he talked through maneuvers with ground tanks, pinpointing farmhouses and red-roofed landmarks to hit specific targets. It was precision air power built not only on systems, but on OKD innovation and liaison. These were no clean dogfights. They were survival. They were mutual emergencies. They were fighting for lives on both sides. Supply lines were P-47's favorite targets, and the Germans paid dearly. Pilots strafe-raided trains relentlessly. Even attempts to arm railcars with flak backfired. One account from March 12, 1945, tells of Colonel Leo Moon. He strafed supply trains with rockets and guns, then began receiving flak from armored wagons. The red-hot hail sounded like hail on a tin roof. His P-47 returned with a near-severed pitot tube and pierced wingtip, but he brought it home. By war's end, these attacks had crippled Germany. The U.S. estimated 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, and 68,000 trucks destroyed from D-Day through the end of World War II. While P-47s excelled in ground attacks, they were no slouches in air combat. Their rugged structure meant they absorbed punishment that grounded more fragile fighters. That same heavy radial engine, it shrugged off flak bursts, bullets, shrapnel, even when cooling systems on other planes leaked catastrophically. P-47s kept flying when no one expected them to. This combination of survivability and firepower turned the Jug into a terror from the sky, where noise, lead, and resilience merged into lethal certainty. As the war wore on, even the most battle-hardened German pilots had to admit their error. Adolf Galland, once the preeminent voice in the Luftwaffe, quietly acknowledged, "We made a terrible mistake." He was referring to the P-47. Underestimating its brute endurance and overwhelming firepower was a strategic miscalculation that cost Germany dearly. Galland's admission wasn't just autobiographical, it was symbolic. For a fighter force built on agility and tactical cunning, admitting that industrial mass and weaponized simplicity had outmatched them was akin to losing a creed. The phrase "Jabo fever" entered German parlance not as a laugh, but as a warning. Picture a quiet village in northern France or Belgium. The afternoon sun filters down on fields and roads. In the distance, the roar of 8.50 cal machine guns begins. 3,000 pounds of metal unleashed per second. Pose, civilians and troops alike whispered the name with fear. Jabo's coming. Vehicles ground to halt. Soldiers dropped prone. It wasn't combat tactics, they were terrified of the sound. Accounts from both sides bring this transformation into human focus. Robert S. Johnson, an American ace, once escaped 3-gun passes from German FW-190s. His canopy was jammed, the cockpit riddled with over 200 bullet holes. Yet his P-47 flew. A German pilot circled, out of ammunition, simply saluted him and departed. With that act, the Jug had earned respect through endurance. Another example. On December 17, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Hellhawks of the 365th Fighter Group decimated a German road column. Over 115 vehicles and artillery pieces confirmed destroyed, more than 65 damaged erect, and untold casualties on the ground. These were not interception sorties. They were lessons in devastation. By late 1944, the U.S. Army Air Forces tallied its Juggernaut. 3,752 Luftwaffe aircraft eliminated in aerial combat by P-47s. Thousands of trains, rail cars, and trucks annihilated en route to deliver German resources. German defenses crumbled under relentless pressure. The P-47 didn't bruise, it obliterated. German leadership shifted tactics, not celebrating the Jug's victories, but learning from its destructive path. A famous dispatch captured a telling moment from General Galland. "Only in the spirit of attack, born in a brave heart, will bring success to any fighter aircraft, no matter how highly developed it may be." He recognized a truth. Technology alone did not win wars. Fear, aggression, and willpower mattered. But when fused with overwhelming industrial firepower, as the Jug demonstrated, the equation shifted. The P-47 was more than an aircraft. It was a living symbol of America's industrial muscle. It was the fighter that could take hits to its radial engine and still deliver bombs, rockets, and 50 cal chaos. It was the machine that German veterans later named as the hardest opponent they faced. A former German POW noted, "No German vehicle dared move in daylight without fearing the screech of Thunderbolt wings." The Jug wasn't just feared. It destroyed any illusion of German aerial superiority. By spring 1945, the war's arc had bent. The fighters who once laughed at the Jug now feared its shadow. Industrial mass had rewritten rules written by dogma. From mocking mammoth to fearsome juggernaut, the Thunderbolt proved mass production can outmatch elite tactics. Durable design withstands more than brittle finesse. Firepower delivered en masse beats precision delivered slowly. For German pilots, that lesson was costly. For Americans, it was a defining moment, not just in war, but in the shaping of global industrial dominance. This was not just a story of aerial innovation, it was a human story of perception shifting in midair, of mocking chaff giving way to silent respect, of a mechanical beast redefining the space between ideology and reality. And for any who heard its roar, the Jug was the voice of inevitability chanting over the battlefield. By spring 1945, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had transcended its mocking debut to become one of WW2's most impactful aircraft. A staggering 15,683 Thunderbolts were built between 1941 and 1945, making it the most numerous American fighter plane of the war. These machines took to the skies in nearly 545,600 combat sorties, logging an estimated 1.35 million flying hours. Their battlefield legacy was defined in raw power. 3,752 Luftwaffe aircraft eliminated in aerial combat. Around 7,000 enemy aircraft destroyed in total, including ground kills. Ground attacks leveled 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 68,000 trucks, and 6,000 armored vehicles. Delivered 132,000 tons of bombs. Loss rate of just 0.7% per mission, a testament to its resilience. Aerial kill ratio stood at an impressive 4.6 to 1, favoring P-47 pilots. Numbers tell one story, but it's the faces behind the numbers that bring history alive. Colonel Hubert Zemke of the famed 56th Fighter Group, the Wolfpack, personified that aggression. Under his leadership, his group tallied 665.5 confirmed kills, more than any American unit in Europe. Zemke's philosophy blended tactical ferocity with human grit, charging enemies with both artillery and resolve. On the German side, reflection came with humility. While Adolf Gallen's exact quote, "We made a terrible mistake," remains elusive in public archives, his broader reflections highlighted a major miscalculation. Modern, heavily armed American planes had overtaken Luftwaffe doctrine born in finesse and maneuver, not firepower and endurance. This shift was felt acutely in the ground war. P-47s strafing convoys, destroying supply chains, and unleashing unstoppable air-ground devastation contributed decisively to the Allied push into Germany, agendas that light fighters couldn't disrupt effectively. The Jug's transformation wasn't rooted in some technical gimmick. It was powered by industrial magnitude. By war's end, nearly two-thirds of all produced Thunderbolts were deployed overseas. Of the 15,683 built, 5,222 were lost in combat, and 1,723 to non-combat causes. Yet, the aircraft's ruggedness let many wounded machines limp home, some with entire wings spattered, but still flying. Such reliability fostered a culture of trust among pilots. Wartime anecdotes rank P-47 as a rare bird. It landed on its belly better than some planes landed on wheels, recalling one pilot's experience. But beyond machines and battles, the P-47 story resonates in a broader arc. American industrial might not only won skies, it helped define post-war geopolitical reality. The Jug's power came from mass American production, maintenance simplicity, and battlefield pragmatism, mirroring democratic logistics, egalitarian training, and open innovation. Its post-war legacy mirrored that as the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, America's rugged ground support plane, even borrowed the Jug's name nodded from the P-47's toughness. Let's return to where the story began, with German pilots laughing at the Jug. That arc, from comedy to terror to respect, is profound. That same aircraft, once dubbed a milk jug, had become the spirit of democracy, resilient, unapologetically industrial, and deadly efficient. It weathered bullets, took low-level goosebumps of fear off enemy lines, and redefined how wars could be won, with abundance, adaptability, and relentless pressure. The Jug didn't reflect German ingenuity, it surpassed it in numbers and sheer will. As the dust settled over WWII, the P-47 Thunderbolt emerged not just as a marvel of engineering, but as a symbol. It represented how an industrial nation could translate mass production into war-winning power. Its wings carried not just bullets, but the ethos of democracy, collective strength, innovation, and endurance. From that flying milk bottle to battlefield legend, the Thunderbolt's journey mirrors America's wartime odyssey and its quiet, defining impact on history. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't simply a revolutionary plane within U.S. air power. It became a global symbol of strength and versatility. By war's end, more than 15,600 P-47s had been built, becoming America's most numerous WWII fighter. But its story didn't end in 1945. RAF received over 800 Thunderbolts Mark I and II, deploying them in Burma and Southeast Asia for ground attack roles for years beyond the war. Free French, Brazilian, Mexican, Italian, Turkish, and Chinese nationalist air forces took them into combat and service post-WWII. Even some in South America flew them into the 1960s. In the Soviet Union, captured P-47s were tested and appreciated for robust design, aerial performance at high altitudes, and production quality. The Jug's presence turned into a durable marker of Allied industrial globalization. The P-47 was not just an aircraft. It was a manufacturing marvel. According to wartime assembly records, each Thunderbolt required components from around 100 companies across the U.S., mirroring Ford's assembly line model where no single factory built the entire aircraft. Only the final assembly took place at Farmingdale and Evansville. At peak rate, Republic Aviation produced 28 Thunderbolts per day, a testament to American industrial scale and efficiency. From raw aluminum to fully armed, turbocharged Juggernaut, the P-47 was truly mass production with wings. The P-47's descendants didn't die with WWI. They evolved. Enter the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately called the Warthog. Officially named after the P-47, it carries that legacy spirit, durability, ground support power, tank-stopping firepower. From its first flight in 1972, the A-10 was built for close air support CAS, not air superiority. The designers, knowing what the Jug taught, designed around its 30mm Gatling cannon, heavy armor protection, twin engines, and short field capabilities. Even today, decades into service, the A-10 embodies the Jug's ethos. Survive hits, keep flying, and keep fighting, a flying embodiment of rugged, democratic air power. The Jug's lineage continues in modern squadrons still flying A-10s. The 357th Fighter Squadron, which flew P-47s in WWII, now operates A-10 Thunderbolt IIs. Other Air National Guard units, like the 107th Fighter Squadron Michigan and the 104th Fighter Squadron Maryland, proudly display the Thunderbolt name aboard their modern CS platforms. These units serve as living homage, aircraft built for armored combat, flown by generations committed to protecting ground forces, still carrying the name Thunderbolt. The Jug's legacy isn't just technical, it shaped a narrative. The P-47 embodied industrial democracy, not individual heroic flight, but communal mass production and reliability. Its continued influence in the naming of later platforms shows that the spirit of rugged service and robust support endured past WWII into modern combat theory. It taught that air power grounded in redundancy, raw power, and serviceability can punch far above tactical finesse in shaping war's outcome. From that first mocking glance in April 1943, to mass deployment across Allied forces, to rebirth in aircraft like the A-10, the Jug's journey is industrial, tactical, and symbolic. It was never just a fighter, it was a statement that in democracy, abundance trumps scarcity, toughness outlasts finesse, and unity hums louder than propaganda.